Good evening, everyone. So let's start the third day of Buddhism for Daily Life discussion series, and I'm going to summarize what we've been discussing over the last couple of days about the nature of happiness. So during the last 2 days, last 2 weeks actually, we have been discussing what is life, and we figured that life is essentially about interactions with the 4 P's, like the 4 P's of marketing: people, places, possessions, and pastimes. So that's like a rough categorical 4 baskets that I created. We can put anything in our life, any interaction in our life, into one of these four baskets. And then we asked the question, why do we live? And then we saw as an answer that we live for responsibilities, duties, wishes, adventure, moments. Now there's a saying that life is about not how many breaths you take, but how many breathtaking moments you have. So we live for moments, we live for fond memories. And while we all do that, while all these answers are correct, we also figured that beyond everything, in a deep down layer, that the primary drive of existence is really happiness and hope. Now happiness and hope is quite interesting. It is again it again has the causality, which is discussed in Buddhism. Causality. Now why do I mean by that? Now happiness is a result of right now. We can only have happiness in the present moment. So at a given point, a person can be either happy, sad, or neutral. So let's say that happiness is can be only perceived, can be only felt in the present moment. Now this happiness, however, it has this effect that because we have this happiness right now, we also get a hope, we also get a desire to have that happiness in another future time of our life. So this happiness now can create the hope which will make us work towards the happiness in the future. So as a cause of that hope, a resultant happiness is now again available. And this result itself can be a cause for the hope again. Did you get that? So happiness will result in or will cause hope to be generated. Because of that hope, we will be doing certain things from getting point to A to point B. Now, if you take a company, the vision and the mission statement. Vision is about what do I hope to be. Mission is what I'm trying to do within that scope. So, happiness is what I feel now, and my hope, my vision takes me there, or I build that hope, and because of that hope, as a result of that hope, I have another happiness in the future. Now, that future is a present time for me again. Now that happiness itself become a cause to create that resultant hope, and that resultant effect becomes the cause becomes the effect. So this is our samsara, or journey of life in a nutshell. So let's get into what samsara means at a later point, but we also saw that our lives are again about avoiding sadness, gaining happiness, and hence trying to be fulfilled in the process, be satisfied, be content in the process. And we also discussed certain natures of happiness. Now the first one we saw is that in order to be happy, you need to have resources, actually multiple resources. So you need to have time, money, and energy. And a person, unless he is born with a silver spoon on his with all these 3 resources in abundance, he has to work for it. So usually what you see in the world is that people are putting a lot of effort, getting into this rat race to get their time, energy, and money. So in this rat race, some people, even at the age of 70, at the age of 80, 90, they are still striving for it, thinking that if I gain this resource, eventually I'm going to be happy. So they keep on doing this, and because of this resource requirement, they actually have to do some work in order to gain these resources. So to do this work, they cannot have their peace, so they cannot rest in peace. Because of this driver, they keep on going on this rat race. And the second thing is, the cost of happiness is ever increasing. Well, why do I say that? Now I remember when I was a child, when I wanted to play, I could just take a small box of matches and think that it's a car, and then drive along my bed thinking that I'm driving on a nice place. And when I want to send a rocket to the moon, I took a ballpoint pen, and it was multi-stage rocket. So I've been flying my rockets as a kid. Now think 20 years, 30 years, 40 years now, you want to own a car. Now of course there's a utility which is a different utility of owning a car. It really takes you from point A to B compared to that toy car. But imagine if your car is about trying to be happy. Now whenever we embark on a journey, when we go on a trip, it's basically to entertain ourselves. So if we take a car for that matter, we want to go to, let's say, Niagara Falls, and we have a car for it. That car is a few $1,000s. We have to pay insurance, we have to pump fuel, do the maintenance, and get all the driving license, etc., etc. So we drive to Niagara Falls. Why? To be happy. We are hopeful that we are going to get happy when we reach there. As a kid, we have the car which is not even a toy car, which is just a box of matches or some box that you find lying around with no cost, and you drive that and you gain the same happiness that you gain as if when you go on a trip to Niagara Falls like an adult. So what's the difference? The cost of that unit happiness is ever increasing. More and more you grow older, you need to fund more resources into that, put more resources into that to gain that same amount of happiness. In fact, most of the time you probably would have felt that you can never be happy as an adult as when you were a kid, because as a kid you were always ecstatic. It was always very nice and fulfilling. But as an adult, you have to pull out these resources, pump them, still you cannot get the same happiness that you got as a kid. And the next thing is that even if we wish for happiness, these wishes always don't come true. And when they don't come true, there's a lot of disheartening. There's a lot of pain, anger, frustration. Imagine out of all the problems that people would complain about, these are the common issues. Pain, anger, frustration. And if you look back what's behind that, it's always that your dreams, hopes, your heart is shattered. So wishes don't come that way all the time, maybe 50% of the time, but at least 50% of the time they are bound to go wrong. And the next thing is that happiness also comes as a package. It comes as comes with a lot of unwanted parts that we really do not want. So there's even a saying that there's no pain, no gain. So in order to have a real gain, you need to have some pain. It's like, I always think that whenever a person is born and whenever he's trying to do something which eventually makes him happy, he's also signing this universal policy. It's like an insurance policy where you generally don't read, or the policy of Microsoft, you never read that. Policy of Google, there are long list of legal words, but you never read them, you just sign it blindly. So happiness is also like that. One day, I think it's a joke, one day this guy was trying to, one day at his 20th anniversary, he was looking through the house, looking through the all legal documents, and then he found the marriage certificate, and then he has been studying that the entire day. So the wife asked, darling, what are you doing today? It's our anniversary day. And then he said, well, I found our marriage certificate. I'm trying to see what is the expiry date or the terminal policy on that marriage certificate. But you cannot find it. So this is the thing with happiness. It comes with an indemnification already. But without understanding that, we just blindly sign it and we enter into a contract with the universe that with that happiness, you are also going to get some downward effects. There's going to be a whole package of it. Only one part is desirable, and then there's going to be 50% at least which are not desirable. So anyway, you are accepting that. And the other thing is, even if you have that, you can never be really fully content. You cannot fulfill, like filling a bucket of water. You cannot never fulfill. Now, why do I say that? Imagine your happiest day that you have ever had in your life. And with that happy day, you went to sleep. Following day you woke up. Yes, yesterday was a happy memory, but it was not as happy as yesterday because that day has gone and it's only a memory. You are not living that moment anymore. And then you sleep again. The next day, it has depleted even a little bit. So we try to get into activities thinking that eventually we are going to get fulfilled. But what actually happens is that no matter how we try to fulfill our 6 tanks, our 6 tanks are the eye, ear, nose, etc., etc., the 5 senses and the mind. We are trying to fill these tanks, but when you wake up on the following day morning, the water is evaporated, as if we haven't fixed a leak and we have to do it all over again. Back in Sri Lanka those days, we had these mobile phones which are top-ups. You have to, they're prepaid phones. So every time you get a call, it's depleted. So you need to top it up again. So essentially, our fulfillment or our life is about trying to top up it with happiness. However, no matter how much we top up, it drains. So that's another nature of life or happiness. And there's another nature. Now, when you are happy, that is the time that you are most anxious, afraid. There's an apprehension of losing happiness. Now, it's like this. Imagine that you are a boy and you are a child. You don't have anything really expensive, valuable in your possession. But when you grow old, you get this really valuable, the most expensive, most valuable diamond in the world. And now you have it. When you want to go on to that Niagara trip, you would want to find a place, find a safe to keep that diamond, valuable diamond, safe. Now, why is that? Because when we own that, we are always afraid of losing it. I don't know if you have had that feeling before. Whenever you are happy, you also think, well, it's really good right now. Am I going to lose it in a moment of time? So that's another nature of happiness. You will always have this apprehensive feeling. Am I going to lose this in a little while? That's another nature. There's a lot more on the list. Now, when you want to be happy with something, there's also a gestation period where you need to wait until the culmination comes. And when that happens, there's a lot of pain due to that longing, that yearning, expectation. Now let's take a simple example. Now there's a lot of movies, there's a lot of sequel movies, there's a lot of television drama series. Series like there's this one very famous TV series, I can't remember the name. So when people are addicted to that, when people are real fans of that, they wait until this next episode comes. And the marketeers, the producers are so clever that they make a ending scene where people want to really yearn for. They are longing for that. So during that gestation of the next event, you have to endure that anxiety or longing or the pain because that you have to endure. It's like again labor pains. Back in the day when I was married, I saw how my wife went into labor. It was almost 24 hours of labor. End of the day, you know that you are going to get this child. But however, in that wait, you need to endure this long labor pain. So happiness also has the same effect. When you expect an event is going to give you happiness, it could be a person, position, whatever, that owning, having that is going to give you happiness. However, that waiting period gives you a lot of pain, gives you a lot of unrest, mind unrest, because of this yearning and longing. Even if you have it, now even if you have it after all these labor pains, things not coming true, etc., still you cannot sustain it. It fades away. It's momentary, not everlasting. Even there's this physical nature in our body that we get desensitized to things. Now, say if there's a bad odor right now in this room, initially when I enter it, I will feel it, but after some time I'll get desensitized. So the happiness also has the same effect. We also get desensitized to happiness. So that's why when you buy something new, you're so excited about it, but after a few days, it's going to get not so exciting. The returns are going to be diminishing returns. The happiness returns are going to be diminishing. And there's another nature of happiness, that it's hard to maintain the originality, because when it's original, you are happy. Well, even physically, you cannot maintain the originality. Now, when you look into advertisements, that there are open box advertisements, there's things which are still in the mint condition. But we know that physically, when you purchase something or when you open that box, it's bound to get depreciated in one way or the other. It will never be on the mint condition. And let's take a relationship. As a young boy or a girl, you meet another partner. It would be like if you're a guy and if you like girls, you meet this beautiful girl who's like a showstopper, beautiful girl. Or if you're a girl, you meet a guy who's a really hunky man who has his six packs and all that. So then you are quite happy. However, you cannot maintain this physical nature as and when you go along the timeline. Now your six packs will become a pot belly, a beer belly, and if you're a girl, you are eventually going to succumb to the gravitational force. So you get wrinkles, and then you need to top it up with Botox, etc. So you cannot maintain that physical nature in this world. Nature is bound to get deteriorated. In fact, the physics call it the entropy. Entropy is ever increasing. You know, the chaoticness, the nature of things are going to be directed towards being orderly to being chaotic, or being chaotic to being ordered. So your physical nature is going to change, but assume if you are a superhuman, you can maintain your physical nature. The phone I bought 10 years ago is going to be the same way as 10 years ago. There's no scratch on it, there's no dent on it, it's going to be the same way as it is. Even if you have that physical nature intact, still you are going to get bored of that originalness mentally. So you are going to you're going to be seeing the same thing over and over again, and you get desensitized, and then you want to go for a new thing, a novelty. So happiness also has this effect. Now these are not things that I'm coming up with. I'm just saying these things. Really try to see if they apply to you, or is it your experience. Another one, assume that everything is perfect. It was in the mint condition, and you did not get bored of it. You are not desensitized to it. However, if you own a magic golf club, every time you swing it, it's going to be, you're going to ace every shot. You know, the ball will go straight to the hole in one, acing. If that happens, the golf is not going to be interesting. You know, you have that magic golf stick where you just swing it, it's a goal, it's a ace. You're going to get bored of that golf game because it's not giving you any excitement. So that's another quality. What else do we have? Well, we can think of a few bonus qualities. That happiness is always unplannable. You know, the best happy moments we have had in our lives were the surprises. You cannot ever plan for a surprise, because by nature it will lose its nature of surprising. So the happiness, the great happiness, can never be planned. So it's such a shame that we are trying to be happy, but happiness has all these downsides. It fades away, it's momentary, originality changes, we seek for novelty, and it cannot be even planned. So the excitement we get out of unplannable surprises cannot be planned with the happiness. Happiness is always inhibiting. Now, why do I say that? We cannot reach that 100% level of happiness because we are always inhibited. Last 2 days we were discussing that we have the fear of punishment, we have the fear of sin. Regardless of whatever religion you follow, even if you don't follow a religion, if you are born into a particular culture as a child, there are these ideas which are embedded in you that there's a sense of sin. So you're bound, you're inhibited by this sense of sin where you cannot go and have uninhibited fun. There's fear of blame and criticism by others, but most dangerously there's fear of self-criticism. We also discussed, unless you are a manic person, a lunatic or a child, you cannot again have this uninhibited fun. Well, I'm not saying that they are having uninhibited fun, but at least if you take a crazy person, he doesn't care about what other people think, he doesn't care about what he thinks, but you don't want to be a lunatic. And even if you become a lunatic, they also don't have that ecstatic, euphoric feeling forever, because they are bound to go into a depression, and there's a whole other package which comes with that. You cannot become a child again. As a child you were happier, but you cannot go back in time anymore. And we also discussed how can we reduce this inhibition. Now, how to reduce this inhibition is that if you live by a set of virtues which are accepted socially, no one would say bad about it, so you are living by your virtues. Now, the downside of it is that usually these virtues has an internal tug of war with your desires. So there's virtue on one hand, and then you also have your desires, and there's going to be some friction between those two. And even if you live by these virtues, you also have this desire which will put you off balance. Another form of virtue is benevolence. Now, benevolence is socially accepted, no one would say anything bad about it, and you can be really happy it's more happy, it's more satisfying than owning something selfishly, to do it selflessly. However, even to be benevolent, there's always resource limitation. And if you are especially a greedy or a stingy or a close fist guy, it's going to be even harder. And if you are close fist and if you still have these desires, being benevolent is harder. On top of that, benevolence will also add on to your ego. You will become more and more egoistic, and when you see a person who's non-benevolent, you will think that, well, this guy is a bad guy, I am a good guy. So you see, it keeps on adding to your ego, completely opposite to being altruistic. Altruism is about trying to let go of your ego, but this is about trying to add on to your ego. So those natures are there. Those were the things that we discussed over the last couple of days. Today, I also want to show another facet of this happiness, which is the relativity of happiness. Now, what do I mean by that? Happiness is always based, it changes with your age. Now, when I say age, it's not necessarily the chronological age, but it's the need age. We discussed about the Maslow's pyramid of hierarchy. Back in the day, you would like a stuffed animal, a PS5, and then a vehicle, a marriage, children, golf, etc. So you see, when you are young, you like stuffed animals, but when you are a teenager, you need this fancy high-tech PS5, and more older you grow, late teens, you need a vehicle, and then adult, you need to get married, have children, and then play golf eventually. So there's this life cycle within your age that it changes with time. So it's very relative. Now, personally, I remember a time when I was a teenager, I would go to the clubs and then I would headbang to the techno music. But then I found later on, when I hit 30s, that club techno music or the metal music or hard rock is not my cup of tea. I want to just sit by the beach, listen to some soothing, relaxed music, and that was what gave me happiness. So happiness changes with your age, with your mental age, with your chronological age. It even changes within a day. What makes you happy in the morning? Let's say music. You want your mornings to be usually peaceful. It's a little bit of a me time. You don't want to hear to that hardcore rock music early in the morning unless you're a uber metal fan. You don't want to do that. And even what you consume, you don't want to drink cocktail early in the morning unless you're a drunkard again. You want to drink coffee or tea, and then at sunset you want to drink cocktail. So you see, what makes us happy is very relative. It changes within the age. It changes even within a day, within the time of the day. It also changes within the environment. You come to a monastery, you become happy coming to a monastery by behaving in a certain way. But the same person that evening goes to a nightclub. He is happy in a different manner. Now, every time I go to weddings, I see that at the wedding ceremonies, the processional part of it, people are happy in a particular way. And then you go to the wedding reception, the same set of people are behaving in a different way. So you see, the happiness also depends on where you are environmentally. And more importantly, it is very much based on the individualness of you. So people, possessions, pastimes, places, 4 P's. 2 people see the same thing, but they have different emotions about it. I'll give you an example. Let's take a beautiful park. Now, when 2 people sees that, one person will remember, well, this is the park, or this is a similar park where my husband proposed to me. And that was a fond memory. It's a beautiful memory. Another person could think, well, this park or a similar park is where my father was mugged and murdered. So it's a complete opposite of that. It's a bad memory. So you see the same thing and then you generate 2 different sets of feeling. So happiness is very individual. It's very relative. And then you also see, let's take a possession like a car. When I see a car, it reminds me of my first car, my vintage first car. But then another person sees the same car, he remembers a very horrific incident where his family got killed in a car crash. So you see the same car, but 2 different emotions. A pastime, let's take a pastime like playing in the sun. Usually boys, they like to play in the sun, especially in a tropical country like Sri Lanka. But when you hit puberty, the teenagers, the girls, they want to stay away from the sun. They want their skin to be glowing and fair. So they stay away from the sun, while the boys, they play in the sun. So within individually, whatever you interact for happiness can be seen differently. Let's take a game like football. It's the same football, and whenever it reaches a certain side, a goal, then one side is very happy, and the other side is very disheartened. They are angry, they are frustrated, they are in pain that their wish didn't come true. But it's the same football. It reaches one side, a set of people are happy, and at the same time, the other set of people, they are unhappy. They weep, the others cheer. And so these are the relativeness of happiness. And there's this very famous saying which is originated through some of the thoughts with this great philosopher called Plato. That's someone who has a lot of similarities to early Buddhist philosophy, a lot of similarities with his Book of Forms. So one thing one idea which led from Plato's original ideas is that beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I think some Irish novelist coined that term properly. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Now, why do I say that? Again, let's take a newborn kid. Now, everyone adores newborn kids, but to me personally, when they are born right after their delivery, they look really ugly. Personally, to me, they are not sweet to me. They look very ugly. But a mother would say, that's the apple of my eye. He looks so beautiful to me. In fact, this is the most beautiful thing that I have ever seen. But if you are not the father, and if you are not a friend, and if you not a uber fan of kids, well, they look really different, because their noses and heads are not properly formed. When they grow a little older, they look better, but right after their delivery, they don't look good, because they have been inside that womb for so many days, and it's like when you're stuck in a cave for 6 months, and when you come out, you're not going to look very nice, prim and proper all of a sudden. You also see that some people get married for a second time, and to see that the first person has given up on this other person, and another person wants to get that person. So the first one you are married to, he really hates you, but the second person really loves you. So you see, this happiness is extremely relative. It's really it's on the eye of the beholder. In fact, the whole concept of marketing. Now, why marketing? When initially cars came out, when Henry Ford made cars, he said, any color, I can offer you any color as long as it's black. Because he didn't care about the differences of colors and all. He only thought of cars need to take you from point A to B. So I can give you any color as long as it's black. That's what Henry Ford said. But later on, the American marketeers, they figured out, the concept of marketing was not very established at the point. They figured that people have different tastes. So we need to offer different colors. We need to offer different shapes, different characteristics. So different wishes, different tastes, they satisfy people differently. So we need to make different products. So you make different music, you make different fashion. If you go to Milan, if you go to Paris, there's different fashion every summer. Everyone likes their own fashion. There's difference in perfume. There's so many shapes and sizes of vehicles. Some like the Suburban, some like the Ram, some like the more economical Prius. So there's so much of variety in what you like. So happiness is very relative. Now the important question is, why is happiness relative? What's the reason behind that? What is the cause for happiness to being relative? Now again, if we take this Buddhist approach, you probably would have seen that we are not satisfied with the mere effect of it. We want to drill down, dig deeper and see what causes that. Why is that? If that particular effect has a negativity to it, to remove that negativity, you really need to go to the root cause of it and then find the cause and then try to fix it. So that is the Buddhist approach. We always look for the cause. We just don't stop at the effect, but we go to the cause. And then we go to the cause, we see that it's another effect of the previous cause or the previous effect itself. So you find this entanglement also. But let's talk about that later. So what causes people to be happy with different interactions, with different things? Why can't everyone be happy with the same thing? Now, if that was the world would have been very much easier. You could put a system like socialism, the ideal socialism, where you give one item to everyone and everyone is equally happy. But naturally, it doesn't work that way. Probably that's why governments want to implement that, but people naturally go towards capitalism because their ideas are different, what makes them happy are different. So there's a natural inclination, they look for variety and so on. But why is the more important question. Is pleasure dependent on the external things or the internal things? Now that's another question we can ask to identify why it's different this way. I remember reading a book when I was young called The Chicken Soup for Souls. Chicken Soup for Soul. It discussed a lot about paradigm shifts. There was this story where a father was traveling on a train, and then he had a lot of kids around him playing and disturbing the other passengers. So there's this one particular passenger in front of him. He was really mad at him. But when they got down at the same train station, this other passenger went and told this father that you should take care of your kids properly. They are a noise. They are a nuisance. You should take care of them properly. And then the father said, well sir, I'm really sorry. I actually even did not notice that because I'm just returning from the hospital where the mother of these kids has just passed away. So I'm in this shock. I am extremely sorry about that. Now when that was heard, when that other passenger listened to that, he was so melted. His paradigm shifted. So this happiness also has to do a lot with our paradigm. Our individual memories, views, they contribute to this paradigm. So based on how you look at things, your happiness can be changed. Now that's why I asked you the question, is happiness depending on external things or internal things? Now that's a major question that we want to look for. There's very easy answer. People would say the happiness is always internal. Well, you're right, but are you sure? If it's internal, why are you looking for different variations, different varieties from the outside world? Why are you doing that? Now that's a question we need to dig deeper. Contrary to the popular belief or the more pop culture answer is that happiness is an internal fact. But the next question is, how sure are you? You tell that to me, but you do the complete opposite. Now why does that happen? So let's dig down deeper. So happiness is of this nature. It's also relative, and we will try to do this. We will try to look at what Pali Canon says about it. Now I need to give you a little bit of trivia about what Pali Canon, which I failed to do last time. Pali Canon or the Tripitaka. Tripitaka is basically the Theravada idea or the Theravada compilation of Buddhist doctrine. But you also find the Chinese compilation, the Japanese, the Far East Asian, the Mahayana canons, the Tibetan canons. You find all these canons. But for the simplicity, we will only discuss about the Theravada traditions here, because I belong to the Theravada school of thought or Theravada tradition. So Tripitaka essentially means a compilation or the triple basket of this Buddhist doctrine. There are three distinct baskets. It has been segregated into three parts. The first part is called the Vinaya Pitaka. Vinaya literally means it's the ways of that particular organization. It's really the organizational code of conduct. So how the monks should behave, what they should do, what time they should eat, all the rules are in that Vinaya Pitaka, the first basket. So this Vinaya Pitaka or the first basket was formed due to social norms at the time for social well-being. Now that's one very important thing that I see, that Buddha's message in this Vinaya Pitaka is not socially harmful. There's in no way that it gives you that small leeway where you can go and harm other people. In fact, it's for the other complete opposite of it. You have to be every time be watchful, be considerate of people around you, because as a monk you will be depending because of these people. So you need to always be considerate, not only to people, to the environment. So it really serves the triple bottom line, the triple bottom line, the profits, environmental profits and the social profit. So it serves all this triple bottom line. And it also makes sure that organization is sustainably, there's this sustainability in this organization. But most importantly, one of the most important things in this Vinaya Pitaka, it also gives you a message which should lead you towards mindfulness. We'll discuss what mindfulness is at a later point. It also does that. So then you find the second basket, which is the biggest basket, the Sutra Pitaka. Sutra Pitaka is really the compilation of the oral tradition. Now these were orally passed down from one teacher to the other, to his disciples. So Sutra Pitaka has subdivisions based on the lineage, based on the teacher and the lineage of that teacher. There are 5 main subcategories, and there are more than 10,000 sutras. Sutra literally means a syntax, but what sutra means is that it's a conversation Buddha had with his disciples, with non-disciples, with kings, with people that he met during his journeys. So all these discussions are put into different baskets and then passed down orally, and then it was written down at one point in first BC it was written down. So then it comes like that. And then you also find the third basket, which is called the Abhidharma Pitaka, which is more of the scholarly version. It contains a lot of arguments, a lot of technical detail, more or less of the same things which are discussed in the Sutra Pitaka, but more of a technical format, more of a scholarly format. So that's Tripitaka. And there's this one important thing with the Tripitaka or the Pali Canon. It always starts, usually, most of the time, it says, as heard and recorded by Reverend Ananda. Now, Reverend Ananda is not me, it's the disciple of Buddha. It's the closest disciple of Buddha. He was taking care of Buddha towards his latter part of life, and he had one wish before accepting that job of taking care of Buddha, is that whatever Buddha says to other people, if I'm not present, if Ananda is not present, you have to repeat it to me. So I'm going to keep that in my mind. But then this is one very important thing. These words, this oral tradition which passed on is not based on Reverend Ananda's understanding, but as the way he heard it. Why do I say that? Now, if it was Ananda's interpretation, it would have many interpretations. You know, Ananda is one disciple, Sariputta is another disciple. So these two can interpret the same thing differently. But Ananda did not do that. He did not give his interpretation, but he just recorded what he heard as it is, like YouTube. YouTube doesn't interpret it, it just shows it as it is, which is a good thing. And because of that, the knowledge system which had that sermons of Buddha was actually called Pali. So Pali is not really a language. Pali essentially means the knowledge of what Buddha uttered, and then it transformed to become a language. But very interestingly, the linguists at the time, they locked the Pali grammar. Pali is a dead language like Hebrew. It doesn't get evolved, so it's a dead language, and because it's dead, all the grammatical rules, all the words, they are locked in. So that's a very beautiful way of preserving the old knowledge system. So that is the trivia about what Pali Canon is. If you are interested, you can also find Pali Canon in suttacentral.net or accesstoinsight.org, a couple of websites. I will leave it in the down section. So this is about Pali Canon, but very interestingly, we were trying to see what did Buddha say about these ideas that we were just discussing, about the relativity of happiness, about this changing nature of happiness. Then we come to this very important sutra from the sutra basket, from the second basket, called the Nibbedika Sutra. Now that Nibbedika Sutra means a penetrative exposition or an explanation. Why penetrative? It's a very sharp, penetrative explanation of this particular teaching. So it goes as a penetrative exposition. And in this Nibbedika Sutra, Buddha talks about quite a lot of things, but I will try to extract only a part and then also discuss only a part that we could finish in a short period of time. So he discussed 5 things mainly on this sutra. What are sensual pleasures? Essentially happiness. There's also this Pali word, should be nice to know. The name given for sensual pleasures is called the karma. Kama is the Pali Sanskrit word given for sensual pleasures. So first of all, the first one is that sensual pleasures should be known. Buddha, this is a sermon by Buddha. You should know what sensual pleasures are. Now that's why I said we are starting our discussion with happiness, because that's the primary driver of our life, and we really need to know the length and breadth of our happiness. What is happiness? What are the characteristics? It's a very important part of our discussion. And then second, you need to know what is the origin of this karma or the sensual pleasure. Third, you need to know the diversity or the differences of this sensual pleasure. Are all of them the same, or is there a diversity in that? You also need to know the repercussions and the consequences of karma. Then you also need to know the cessation, and the practice that leads to their cessation also should be known. Buddha says that. And then he goes on to explain each point one by one. So it's a very long sutta, but I'm going to extract only a very small part of it, a portion of it. So the first one is, what is sensual pleasure? What is karma? We know that sights perceived by the eye that are likable, desirable, agreeable, pleasant, sensual and arousing, that is karma, that is happiness, right? That is sensual pleasure. Sights perceived by the eye, sounds known by the ear, smells known by the nose, tastes known by the tongue, touches known by the body, that are likable, desirable, agreeable, pleasant, sensual and arousing, that is sensual pleasure. But then Buddha says, these are not sensual pleasures. This is not karma. Excuse me? This is what karma is. But Buddha says, no, they are not karma. There are 5 kinds of sensual stimulations, ingredients for sensual pleasures. They are called karma guna. Ignore the word, but I'll just mention it anyway. Karma guna, or the ingredients or the stimulations for these 5 sensual pleasures, they are different. They are different from just sensual pleasures. They are the ingredients. And there's this very famous saying in Buddhism called Sankapparago Purisasa Kamo, which in a crude sense again means greedy intentions, or rather desire. I think the first day Jason even asked this question around this thing. Is it desire? So greedy intentions or desire is a person's sensual pleasure. The world's pretty things aren't the sensual pleasures. Now let's try to elaborate on that point. Greedy intentions or desires, they are the sensual pleasures. The world's pretty things aren't the sensual pleasures. What are the world's pretty things? Sounds known by the ear, which are desirable, agreeable, likable, pleasant, arousing, they are not sensual pleasures. But the desire or the greedy intention, that is really the sensual pleasure, hence known as karma. Sensual pleasure of a person is based on a conceptual desire. I'm going to repeat it again. Sensual pleasure of a person is based on a conceptual desire. Let's see what it is. There are ingredients for sensual stimulations in the world, which can be seen as good, bad, likable, dislikable, despicable, whatever. They are basically dependent on the species, on the life form. Now let's say if we consider the aspect of food. Now just on the other side of the road there's a farmland, and there's a horse, a little small horse. Now whenever we walk by, we also gaze looking at that farmland, and the horse grazes on it. So he eats the nice weed over there, nice hay and everything there. Now as a man, I don't look at this grass thinking it's a delicious food, but the horse, when he sees the grass, it's a food for him. So based on your life form, based on your species, what is likable, what is desirable is different. What can become an ingredient for your pleasure can be different. I'm again mentioning the ingredients for pleasure, not pleasure itself. So ingredients of pleasure and pleasure are 2 things. We usually think that the things that we see are the pleasure, or interacting with the 4 P's is the pleasure. But here it says that interaction or that 4 P's is not the pleasure or karma, that is something else. But you have these ingredients. the stimulants, the building blocks for that pleasure. They are called kama guna. And this grass in this matter is a food for the horse, but it's not food for me. Of course, it's a beautiful sight for me, but if we take the angle of food, it's not food for me. And if you take this wooden desk in front of me, a termite would see that. I'm assuming that termites think this way. So a termite might think, wow, this is IKEA wood. I really love IKEA wood. But for me, it's just a piece of material, furniture. So I don't see it as food, but a termite would see it as food. These days, around this Barry's Lake, it's the spring and it's the mating season for nesting season for all the birds here. So the Canadian geese, the swans, everyone, they are out there trying to make babies. And when I look at them, it's just a very beautiful sight. I see different bird species. But when another Canadian male goose see another female goose, he doesn't look at the female lady goose the same way. He looks with a sexual intention, sexual desire. So see, I see the same thing, he sees the same thing, but the two feelings are very distinct, and it totally is based on the life form. I can't look at a Canadian unless there's something different with me. I can't look at it as a sexual object, but the Canadian male goose see that other female goose as a sexual object. So based on your life form, you look at things differently. And even a man looks at a woman, a figure of a woman, and he could think that this is like my mother, this is like my sister, it's like my wife, it's like my boss. So you look at the same person, but you think differently. Now, a very interesting story I have heard in psychology a lot is the story of King Oedipus. Now, Sigmund Freud uses this story to for his psychoanalysis, but if you don't know the story of King Oedipus, I will put it very roughly. So long time ago, there was this King Oedipus. Actually, he was not a king, so he was born, and then there were these astrologers, the fortunes tellers. They figured out that born to a kingdom, born to a king and a queen, they said that if you keep this little baby, he's eventually going to destroy this kingdom, and he's going to kill the father, who's the king. So the queen and the king, they were quite sad about it. What they did was they put him in a basket and then let it pass through the stream. That's what usually you do if you are in the Roman Empire. You put the kid in a basket and then let it flow. So then this kid went all the way to the next kingdom. It was picked up, and the king and queen there, they adopted this little boy, and they called him Oedipus Rex. So now he was living there. He became an adolescent prince, and the fortune tellers there, the astrologers there, looked at his whatever the thing, and they said, well, this guy is going to kill his father. And after listening to that, he was shocked. He really loved his new parents. He didn't know the existence of his previous parents, biological parents. So he was really upset because of what he heard, that he is going to kill his own father. And then he did not want that to happen, so he left that particular kingdom and he roamed all the way to a different kingdom. And when he was about to cross to this other kingdom, there was a bridge, and there was another man who was coming, and then for the right of passage, there was a fight, there was an argument, and then they got into a sword fight like back in the day, and then they started fighting, and somehow this guy killed the other guy, the older guy. So then that's it. He went to that kingdom, stayed a few months in that kingdom, and then there was a vacancy. The previous king has left the kingdom, so they were looking for a new king. So people somehow came and picked this guy, and then long story short, he became the king. And when he became the king of this other kingdom, he saw that the queen of the previous king is there, so he married his previous queen, concubine. And so now he's living happily, and then he comes across another piece of information that what really happened was that guy who he met on the bridge the other day is actually the previous king. But more shockingly, it's actually his own biological father. So the astrologers were right at the end of the day. He actually killed his own father and he married his own mother. This is a play by Sophocles. It's a play by Sophocles. It's not a real story, probably. So when he figured out that he killed his own father and married his own mother, he was so devastated. He took his mother's hairpin and blinded himself. So that is a great Greek tragedy by Sophocles. But the point of this, what I want to bring out of this, is not what Sigmund Freud wanted to bring it. He wanted to bring out something entirely different. But what I wanted to bring out is that Oedipus Rex looked at the queen as a queen where he can have a kingdom with. So a moment ago, before he heard that piece of information, that was a queen. That is what he was thinking when he saw this woman. But in a split second, it changed from queen to mother. So you see that the pleasure that you get from different things are very much based on your internal conceptual desire, aka fantasy. It is very much based on your internal desire, which is highly conceptual, which is a fantasy. So this is the key message of Nibbedika Sutra, but it goes on further to say the 5 things I mentioned earlier. What is really sensual pleasure? Now we figured out that it's not what you see, it's not what you hear. They are just mere ingredients. They are ingredients. However, these ingredients are also based on your life form. If you are a termite, wood is food for you. If I'm a man, wood is not food for me. The swans are not mating for human. They are not sexual objects for human, but it's a sexual object for that particular species. The beaver would not look at the swan and think this is a good mate. Even within species, it's different. So that ingredient, while it's very much based on life form or what life you are in, what species you are, at the same time, it also changes a lot within the individual conceptual thinking, with the individual fantasy. And then it goes on to discuss the diversity of these pleasures, the source of this pleasure, the repercussions, and the cessation. Now, repercussions and consequences, that is what we have been discussing over the previous 2 days. The nature of happiness. Happiness has these different characteristics. Happiness is good. However, these characteristics I pointed out, they are not bad. Essentially we want to be happy. However, we cannot do that because it is subjected to all these other changes. Now, if I have to put this doctrine in a few words, life is about trying to reach satisfaction. You need to do some work towards gaining this satisfaction or gratification. Happiness and hope for happiness are the 2 key drivers that keeps you going. Let's call it desire and pleasure right now. So we use the word happiness and hope for happiness. Let's replace the happiness with the pleasure, sensual pleasure, and hope for happiness by the word of desire. So we have desire and pleasure now. However, you cannot have only happiness or pleasure, hence satisfaction. You cannot only have that. It's associated with sadness, with suffering, with a lot of baggage which comes along with that. Now, if a person wants to live a meaningful life, if he really wants to find the ultimate elixir or the thing that which gives you the ultimate satisfaction, you need to figure out how to rid of this suffering part and just keep the satisfaction part with you. Simple as it is. It's very simple. Life is such. But if you want to be eternally happy, you want to get rid of this suffering part and you want to keep the satisfaction part. And what is the path proposed to that? That is the liberation in Buddhism. So Buddhism, if I have to put it in a nutshell, is about the pursuit of satisfaction, about the pleasure that you get in this pursuit of satisfaction, and also the repercussions that you have, consequences you have in this pursuit of satisfaction, which is called suffering. And what is the path proposed, which is the path for liberation. So that is Buddhism in a nutshell. So to summarize what we have been discussing today, sensual pleasures are based on the individual's desire, which is highly conceptual. Hence the sensual pleasures are not coming from outward, they are really coming from inward. Therefore, all these characteristics of happiness we discussed, we saw in the past couple of weeks, that they have to be generated within. Now, we said that they have this nature fading away, etc., etc. We know that it should logically come from inside, but why is it like that? That is what we are going to find out next week. We are going to dig deeper and see why conceptual nature of our existence gives us this particular characteristics of happiness. And we are going to drill down, we are going to dissect it, we are going to put it under a microscope and then find what is the exact nature of our existence in detail, and the conceptual nature of our existence in detail, and how we live in a fantasy, intoxicated, dreaming, and resisting to come out of that and wake up to our senses. We are going to see that in the next week. So that is the end of the discussion for today. If you have any questions arising from today's discussion and the previous 2 days, this is the time for that Q&A. What do you think about the characteristics of happiness, and what caused that happiness? And do you really think that desire or karma, or rather sensual pleasure, are they based on what we see, what we hear, what we sense, or are they based on something else, which is a conceptual fantasy? What do you think about it? So if you have any questions, this is the time for that Q&A.
I'll jump in and say it's very clear. And again, thanks very much for spending Saturdays with me. And I think for myself, this concept of desire and how it's that's how marketing works, right? My son just went out and bought, a very expensive but ugly pair of shoes. But I think Nike has built up this desire for them, through their marketing program, that it's taken on this meaning that I can't relate to. So yeah, it's funny just how applicable, the teachings of millennia ago, how applicable they are today in modern society.
That's very correct. In fact, not only marketing, you will see the entire human effort to live, economics, agriculture, engineering, they are all based on this simple concept, that individual desire we have. Economics is totally based on this. Politics, wars, they are all based on this desire. So it's a very interesting thing to see that Buddhism is really everywhere. It's not lying on a book on a shelf. You see that everywhere, because this nature is, again, when I say Buddhism, I don't want to call it even Buddhism. It's a universal thing. It's everyone's observation and everyone's explanation. So you find it in every aspect of your life, and in the core of that you find this desire. But still, very, very nice observation, but that is not the end of it. Behind this desire, there's another puppet master. So we are going to find who that is. So we'll do that next week. And then that's it for today. So I wish every one of you have a pleasant evening, and I wish you Teruvan Saranai, which means that may the triple gem bless you. And I'm going to tell you again, as I promised on a later day, what does triple gem means in Buddhism. So Teruvan Saranai, may the triple gem bless everyone.